Oh man.
Hey Morgan, what the
Hello.
heck? Seeing you on a Wednesday? What
I
is
know.
this?
Good morning, everyone. Hello. Will,
Hey,
you're
hey.
here with us today. Oh my gosh. Kevin, you're joining. Good morning. Happy Wednesday.
Howdy.
Hey,
Happy
everyone.
to be here.
And thanks, everyone, for joining today. This is a Sales Development Power Hour with three, four. I don't know if I'm incredible, but I'll say three incredible people talking about cold calling, emailing, and social selling, the modern toolkit for sales professionals. Around here, Will, Kevin, I'm just going to throw you right into it. We like to start with a question of the day. Nothing related to the topic yet, but and for everyone who's joining us, hello, drop a hello in chat, and also drop an answer to this question if you want. So what's the one thing you'll never miss on TV?
Ooh.
Could be sports, could be a show. Like, what's one thing you'll never miss?
I got an answer for you.
Okay, Kevin.
Go for it, Kevin.
Golf.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Nicholas, rooting my thunder. But the Masters, right? So the Masters golf tournament is every year in the early springtime, and I don't think I'll ever miss it.
That's awesome. Will?
Right?
Mine's the Super Bowl. So I used to work in marketing, and so I'm a geek for the commercials and the thinking behind it. Yeah.
Did you like the Coinbase ad this year?
I mean, the one issue I have with it is it crashed their website.
Yeah.
Which I'm thinking about a financial security product. That's not very secure. So
that's great.
Love the idea, not the execution.
Totally. How about you, Nick? What's one thing you'll never miss?
I don't watch a lot of TV, but I am really excited about the Battle of Alberta for hockey right now.
Hashtag Canadian things, right?
My wife's from Pittsburgh, so she was all about the Penguins until it didn't work out.
Don't bring that around the house anymore.
That's so great. That's awesome, guys. Well, thank you. I was trying to think of what's one thing I'd never miss on TV. We've enjoyed a lot of the Disney Plus shows that come out recently. We're a big streaming household, so we've been tuning into those.
Oh man, I on the Disney Plus note, I have a 1-year-old. Okay, so my daughter's 15 months. You got to check out Minnie's Bow Tunes. Okay, Minnie Mouse. They're 3-minute long episodes of Minnie Mouse and her friends going on adventures, and my daughter loses her mind every time we turn it on. So we watch 3 of those every night. So Minnie's Bow Tunes, highly recommend. Really funny episodes.
That's awesome. Well, hello, everyone who's joining us. We got a great chat going across all of our different channels. We're seeing everybody who's chatting, whether you're logged into one of our streams. Kevin is dealing with an electrician, so he'll be right back. Don't worry. I love seeing all names, new names, old names. Thanks, everyone, for joining this morning. It's great to see you here. So today, what we're talking about is sales development in the modern world, and especially where my head's at and what I want to talk to all of you, everyone on this call about, and hear questions about in chat and answer questions that people have is in our post-COVID world. What does sales development look like? Because I feel, and maybe I'm not, I feel like we had a cadence of change. Things were changing starting in 2018, 2019. But then March 2020 happened and that gas pedal just hit and everyone went remote. And now we have this remote sales world. So on top of everything else that's changed in our culture. So today we're talking about what's changed and how can we still use these tools of the trade in this modern world? Will, it seems like you had something on tip of your tongue. Am I wrong?
I'm so curious how the social selling answer is going to come out because it's totally different, right? How people use LinkedIn is completely evolved. So that's the one that I want to hear. Above all else.
No pressure, Nick. None at all.
No pressure.
So So maybe let's start there. Nick, what do you see when it comes to social? So for everyone, sorry, I should probably do a little intro. So we got Kevin here representing cold calling. We got Will Allred representing emailing. We got Nick Thicket representing social selling. Go check out all their profiles. They're incredible human beings. Give them a follow. So Nick from social selling, what's changed in the last couple of years? What is different today than it was in 2020?
It's funny. I was just talking to Dream Data about this morning, so hopefully this rehearsed enough of an answer to fill the void for you, Will. We switched to sellers kind of driving in campaigns to it getting put to buyers. And one of my things that I love about running social campaigns is instead of saying, how can I get a meeting, is in the next 60 days, how can I get that account to ask me for a meeting? What do they need to know in order to book a meeting with me? What are those 5 to 10 things I need to answer in my content that I need to put out in comments? Who are the 5 people that need to know I exist in those accounts? And instead of, to me, a lot of like when I used to cold call, there was always like, okay, I'd go and Kevin will probably laugh because we've all been, they'd hand you the phone book and you would just call because that's what they used to do.
Brutal.
Like 10 plus years ago was here's the phone book and just call her. They drop you off in a job site area. They're like, just go door to door and knock. But right now, and I will post about this all the time, is it's all based on triggers. If there isn't a why now, if there is no trigger, no reason why now, you shouldn't be doing outreach. I would rather use indirect methods and build relationships and, build that community around, whether it's my posts or other great influencers like Will and Kevin, and keep that community built and growing, because when people are ready and that trigger exists, they trust me to reach out. So it's really about earning trust at scale and how to make sure the right people know you exist and building them up as a buyer so that when they work with you, they get the most value out of working with you. If not, maybe now's not the time.
I have a question on that front, Nick. I'm a huge fan of, if there's a trigger, it's a great idea to reach out and have a conversation with someone. How do you forecast for triggers? How many meetings can you promise you'll get me off of triggers with good social selling techniques in a month? Like, is there a process for that? Like, I don't know. I don't really build lots of structure around social selling, and we'll get into this a little later, but I'm a huge advocate for social selling and email. Newsflash, not one of us is going to walk away here. It's like Kevin won today or Will won. No, you got to be doing all of it.
Cold calling is dead.
Yeah, cold calling is dead. Exactly. So I'm curious, like talk me through that. Like, how do you say, like, if you only wait for triggers for, okay, I'm going to build this network of me being in these people's social awareness engines, how do I, well, shoot, there's no triggers this month. I didn't get any meetings, boss. There were no triggers.
How many triggers do you need to hit quota? It's
That's
not a 1 or 2, right? This is where I see a lot of people are like, well, there's only so many people that are hiring an SDR manager right now. There's only so many people that are hiring a sales enablement manager, or that are raising funds, or that got a promotion. But you got to stack these triggers until you get enough triggers that you hit quota. And then you also want to supplement with conversations that are happening at scale, because there's, just like a doctor, when you have the sniffles, there's signs and symptoms that come out in conversations that something's wrong. Maybe Will's looking at, I hate email because nobody ever responds to me, or no response. And you search that on LinkedIn, and then you can jump into those conversations as they're happening and help that person get that promotion, help that person get the results. And so it's compounding. It isn't just one layer. And I think, like, even with us talking today, not one of us is just using one layer when it comes to our outreach. We're not just using LinkedIn or just using email or just cold calling. It is a blend of all of them, but it all starts with having enough triggers, enough reasons to reach out in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And on that point, when I hear triggers, right, I think it's easy for sellers to forget, like, what they're actually trying to do. We get so caught up in, like, because we know what triggers are, right? But like, it's easy to get caught up in the lingo of like collecting these like items within your research process. There's nothing wrong with just saying this person looks like somebody who I've sold to in the past and I've solved problems for before, right? Like it's great if you're able to come with this excellent observation of like, hey, it looks like you're hiring. I imagine you're starting to think about ramping up and onboarding those new reps, right? That's a trigger, the observation. But say in the absence of the observation, you're trying to write to somebody who's within your ideal persona, ideal type of company. And you can still have a conversation and be like, hey, when I talk to sales leaders at companies just like yours, example, Sendoso, right? They are telling me that they're struggling with onboarding. It's the same thing. Triggers, all we're trying to do is have a valid reason for showing up and interrupting somebody, whether that's their inbox on LinkedIn, them on the phone, or in their email inbox.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Well said. So let's not lose this thread real quick. Will, what do you think has changed in the last couple of years in our post-COVID world when it comes to email? Email outreach.
Well, we've seen a lot of data on a month-by-month basis sort of go by, right? We're up to now processing 2.1 million emails every month. And so one of the biggest trends that we've seen shifting. So simple emails were always more effective, but the length of those emails has dramatically changed. So when we first started, you could get away with a 50 to 250 word email, which like seems wild now that you could write 250 words and get a good response rate. But now that it's like shortened consistently over the past 2 years to now the best emails, and when I say best, they're getting the most positive response, are between 25 and 50 words.
Wow. Is that about a tweet, basically?
Yeah.
I don't know how the character count matches up here, but like that seems close.
Yeah, a great writing exercise is actually, can you fit your email in a tweet? And a good reason for that is, one, if you think about characters, it sort of forces you to use shorter, simpler language as well, shorter, simpler words, more choppy sentence structures. And so all of these things sort of come together. I see somebody asking about increased use of mobile.
I was just about to pose that, yeah.
So it hasn't really changed. It's stayed consistent that your first impression is most likely going to happen on a mobile device. It's, I think, 8 times more likely that first impression is on a phone. And so like I think I literally posted today. Mobile like preview, what it looks like on a phone. That's your first impression. So yeah, having a valid reason for showing up and starting with that is key to that process.
That's awesome.
Will, I'm really curious, what drove this emphasis for an economy of words? Like what was different where it's like, hey, you used to be able to write everything you wanted to write and you didn't have to go through this revision process of like, okay, say it easier, say it simpler. But like, obviously the data is showing that short and sweet to the point is killing it. I'm curious why. Do you have an opinion there?
So we've looked across a number of like different studies from different sales enablement platforms, and the number of emails that went out the door have gone up. So it's about, I think it's over double, whether you're looking at series data.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so you're getting a lot more emails going out the door, and so people's BS meter has just sort of raised that bar as well.
That competitive noise, it's crazy. Actually, I'm grateful I haven't received like a lot of lengthy, mostly is what I get, emails that are cold pitches in my inbox for the last couple of weeks. Maybe it's just because I haven't been super active and people are like, I don't need to message him. But it is true, like that benchmark or that like base level, I feel has gone up for me personally, where it's like, oh, I've heard this before. Like all those little red flags kind of go off. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to respond to this.
Well, even like Will in his post today, you're talking about like the preview. I think another thing that's changed is so many people start with why you instead of why change, why now. And you'd see the preview and it's like they just start in their solution. I'm like, and delete. Because there was no problem statement. There was no observation. There was no getting me to think about the problem I have. Because if I would have known there was a problem, I would have already went and solved it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things you're hitting on there, which is like the idea we know better than the prospect, right? You've researched them for all 5 minutes, and then you're going to show up and tell them how to run their business, and they're like, "Bro, I live in this. Don't you think I know? Like, if I could fix it, I would." So, like, one of the things that we see, and this is particular to cold email, is the use of. I'd be curious to hear how this translates to cold calls, but the use of tentative or unsure tonality. So adding things like hedge words into your writing. So, hey, this might be top of mind, or this could possibly help. That kind of language, curious if, correct me if I'm wrong, it crushes it for cold email. Instead of saying, I saw you're hiring, looks like you might be hiring. Just like a slight change of language seems to have a huge impact on response rates.
That's actually interesting, Will, because I want to jump to cold call in a second. But one of the biggest pieces of advice I see that circulates on LinkedIn, to Nick's area of specialty, is like you want to strike out that language when it comes to writing posts. So when you're creating content or you're doing comments, you want to strike the hedge words because you need clarity in the post. Meanwhile, in another method, you might actually want to use them because it communicates and connects differently in a different medium. That's really interesting.
It's definitely specific to cold email.
That's crazy.
The not so secret is that I think the best cold callers are using very similar language. You can't. So like when I learned how to cold call, when I was an SDR back in 2015 at a venture-backed startup, I had that very similar, like when you were explaining that, Will, I'm like laughing to myself. I'm like, man, I remember being 20, 23, 24 years old. And the guy who was teaching us, who was not our VP, we didn't have a VP of sales, which is another crazy story. But this guy who was not our VP who was teaching us was like, so when you reach out to these VPs, we gotta use the challenger method, okay? Teach them, tailor your message, and take control of the narrative. So I remember picking up the phone and being like, VP of customer success at this big tech company. The way you're doing content, your internal content is all wrong, and we're seeing it this. And like I'm like trying to like dictate to this person who's been in their field for 25 years and has this VP title, like telling them what they should be doing. And I'm like, oh God, this doesn't work very well. So I'm glad that that's something you've observed, because I teach the same thing on the phone, no surprise, which is be curious, be interested in their business. Don't tell them how it is out the gate. No one likes to hear their baby's ugly. I mean, come on. Even though most babies are kind of ugly, they don't want to hear that it's ugly.
Yeah. And actually some writing that I suggest to folks when they do have to call the baby ugly is the idea of like creating psychological safety. So what you do is you basically what's the word I'm looking for? You basically let them know they're not alone. So you'll say, hey, I imagine you're going through this challenge. Our customers have gone through the exact same challenge. They approached it the exact same way that you did, right? That's what you're trying to show them, is like, you're not dumb for making this decision, but there is a better way. And I've shown others the light before, and let's have a conversation about it.
That's awesome. Kevin, what about you? What's changed in the last couple of years? And I do want you to address maybe the dead horse dead on, because we'll kick it once again. Is cold calling dead?
Oh, geez. Is cold calling dead?
We'll just give it one more kick for good. Every 3 weeks, there's a big famous post that cycles through LinkedIn of like, cold calling's dead.
That was the first post that I had on LinkedIn that went like semi-viral. Like I put like cold calling is dead, period. And then I did like the space, and then line. And then I did that in like 2019. And I remember getting like 100,000 post views and 50 comments. And I was like, oh my God. It was before I ever had like a LinkedIn strategy. And now I've got like, it's a different thing. But I think cold calling the way that Nicholas was taught with, here's the yellow pages and here's a phone. Go ahead and, go at it. Yeah, that's pretty much dead, I would think. And I actually believe cold calling is dead. And I'm here just to ask Will if I could work at his company, because cold calling's dead and email's the future. And
oh man, that's good.
So let's talk about what's changed. So what has changed in cold calling is it is harder than ever before to ring someone's phone. Steve Jobs had a great idea. He came up with this smart device. Now they have turned this thing into a salesperson's biggest enemy. And Will knows what I'm talking about. The Google and Apple are not salespeople's friends. There are all sorts of ways for them to block cold emails from getting into their inbox, to anonymize, you never have to give people your email information. And now Apple has a feature on your phone. You can't even ring someone's cell phone. You can't call their cell phone, period, if you're not in their address book. And I should redact that statement and no one ever mentioned that ever again, because I don't want people to know that. Don't do that, because I can't cold call you if you do that. So what has changed is, if you look at a given list, let's say we got 100 people that I'm trying to reach on this list, and it's a list of 100 people, probably in 2019, 55, 60 of these people will pick up their phone. If you ring their number consistently over a week, they'll pick up their phone. There's always going to be people that will never pick up a cold call, and they're not my friends. they're not people that I like. Although, like, people in my own family, like my uncle's like a CFO at a big company. He's like, I never take cold calls. I'm like, dude, come on. Don't have that attitude. Pick up the phone, man. But now that list is shorter. That list is way shorter. So now it's probably 30, 35, maybe 40 people of that list of 100 people that are actually going to pick up their phone. And that is honestly the biggest change. The biggest challenge with cold calling today is that people are not picking up their phone the way they used to. And technology that we all have in our pockets is working against salespeople, not
Kevin,
for you.
Is going direct or indirect faster? And I mean with the phone call, because I know when I used to cold call, one of my favorite things to do is call the gatekeeper and make them my friend and leverage their knowledge of the company to get into that exec's calendar. I found that 5 times faster than calling the exec. Does that still work?
I can say that during COVID, that did not work. Like that it went really like off a cliff in terms of like, like companies that have a policy around not calling cell phone numbers or not calling direct numbers, which there are some out there. And I had a client in 2021 where the CEO said, I don't want people calling my cell phone, so my reps are not calling cell phones. That sales job kind of sucked for the reps because they spent all day talking to gatekeepers and they were just trying to finesse gatekeepers constantly. We were just working on techniques. So it really didn't work during COVID. Now, can it work moving forward? I got to say maybe. And it really depends on your target market, right? If you're only trying to set a cold meeting with an executive and they have someone who's a gatekeeper blocking you, I mean, the constant trying to finesse gatekeepers that's hard. That's really tough. The only time I would recommend that is if you're in an enterprise selling environment and this one meeting could mean a lot to you, right? And to your point, Nicholas, you have a trigger, you have a reason. There's some valuable there, right? Because one of the things that I teach my consulting clients around cold calling process structure and strategy is you have to treat everybody on this list the same way. You can't like hold some of these people up and say like, well, these are more valuable than these other people. And that's how you get on the phone and you get one of these like, your heart's going like this. Oh my gosh, Nicholas. Yeah. Oh, this is Kevin. Yeah, I've been meaning to reach you for like weeks. Oh my God. So I at my company, we do the greatest thing. Hey, Kevin, stop. Take me off your list. And then there's that ego death, that like, oh my God. Come on, everyone listening that's on this thread. If you ever made a cold call, you know what I'm talking about. This is why I love cold calling, because my heart still to this day, when I press go, your heart rate just goes. Yeah. But the whole idea here is like, don't put so much of an emphasis on it that you're chasing these people and calling the gatekeeper 5 times. You finally get into this person's ear and you just fumble it. You vomit all over the keyboard. You're like, oh God damn it. It's over. I lost. I'm gonna get fired this week. Oh no.
So one thing I got, and so everyone who's with us today, who's maybe never joined a B2B Power Hour before, we love making these hours about your questions as much as ours. And if you've got questions, I've seen some dropped in the chat. If you've got more questions, drop them in and we'll get to them later. But the question that I really want to dive in a little bit on, we've talked about this concept of triggers, right? We've talked about this idea that you need to be targeting, or that you need to be building a list. And obviously list building is something that kind of gets thrown around in the sales development vernacular. And sometimes sales teams are really serious about it, and others are kind of like, we did a poll from Zoom Info, and here try and get in front of these people. When you think about your area of expertise, when you think about phone calls, when you think about emails, when you think about social selling, what are the indicators of a good list?
Well, I'll start it off by saying that cold calling list building and email list building are similar, but there's nowhere to hide with cold calling list building. Not saying that you can hide with email, but I am saying that if you send an email to the wrong person, it is possible, and I've had it work out, where wrong person writes sort of message that hits something and they forward that email internally. And then we've all done this where you're looking at your email software and you're like, the reds, opens on the emails like ding, 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 ding. And you're like, oh my God, everyone at this company is reading my email. I got 70 opens here. And then all of a sudden you get an email from someone in another department saying, hey, I got this email that landed in my inbox and this is interesting. I would like to, and you're like, oh, sweet. So that doesn't really happen with cold calling like that. You got to be much more like, why are you calling me? For this reason. So list building, the line around list building that I always say, and I'll steal this directly from a mentor of mine, Ryan Reisert, the list is the strategy. The amount of effort you put into building your list is going to be like the quality time you put into building your list will determine the quality outcomes you have with cold calls. So that's my statement there. List is the strategy, but I'm curious what Will thinks.
Yeah. So I am of a similar mindset to you that list building is really important. So it's if you look at the math on doing outbound, right? It's the number of things that you do multiplied by your conversion rate. Say I have 1 hour and I spend every 4 minutes, or let me think about the math. It's every 3 minutes, and I'm able to send an email every 3 minutes, and I get a 4% reply rate. That's scenario A. Scenario B, I send an email every 8 minutes, but I get a 10% reply rate. Scenario A actually performs better when it comes to actual results, which, talking about less than 50% of the reply rate, but it's because you're able to send more emails, which okay, where am I going with this? It's about building a personalization process so you can still get that 10% reply rate within that 3-minute window of doing your research and writing your email. So one of the fastest ways to speed up why you're reaching out is to build narrow lists. So grab LinkedIn Sales Navigator and, pull more than just B2B SaaS VPs of sales. Do it by company size, do it by, growth of department, do it by things changing within that organization to get a little bit more specific. But also within your own process, understand what are those valid triggers, where do you go find them, and build a process for where are you going to go from a click path perspective, from a reliability of those resources perspective, as well as just how relevant those resources are going to be, right? Like jumping onto a Glassdoor review page might not make the most sense for you. Sounds like a fun avenue to go down, but you got to cut that from your process so you can get more emails out the door, and then have fallbacks so that as you're going through that emailing process, you don't find yourself spending too much time while you're trying to get those emails out the door. So having a narrow list helps you narrow down the list of places that you have to go to find information. And so list building is actually really important, especially in a personalization driven email world where we all live today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Will, you touched on something there. You mentioned time. Time is the one thing that we all have the same amount of, right? It doesn't matter what tools you have at your company or what's going on. We all have the same amount of time. And I think the cardinal sin of sales, right? And this is something that I stole from John Barrows. Shout out JB Sales, okay?
JB.
The cardinal sin of sales is not losing a deal or not getting a meeting. It's taking a long time to lose a deal or to not get a meeting.
Yeah.
So what the happy balance you need to find is, okay, it takes me 16 minutes to research to send this email. Or, I've seen reps say like, hey, I'm going to send 15 targeted emails today, and they spend 6 hours and they only get, 10 of the 15 actually sent. And then they get 0 replies from 10 emails. And I'm like, all right, guys, it's the same idea, to Nicholas's point, as calling that gatekeeper. And mistaking talking to gatekeepers all day is productive, when actual completions with prospects is what we want. Actual conversations with target prospects is what moves the needle. The same idea as actual responses from emails is what moves the needle. It's not the act of sending the email.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
What about you, Nick? What's when it comes to list building for social selling, what makes a good list?
So we did an experiment. We were looking at what the top 10% of sellers were using for filters and how many in particular. And we found out that the bottom 10% used less than 4, and the top 10% used anywhere from 8 to 20. And so when you're in Sales Nav on the top left, it'll show you filters applied. The one thing that everybody needs to know about filters is there's an expiry date on pane. Unless that pane is ongoing and it's something that's just in their workflow and it's never going to change, there is a 90-day expiry date on most pane triggers. And so what I look to do when I build my lists is I look at what is that motivation to change? Why them? Why now? Is it because what is that mindset shift that makes right now a good time to have that conversation? Why would they be open to it? Is it because who they're hiring? Is it because the rate of growth in a department? Is it the decrease of growth in a department? Is it a funding round? Is it a promotion? And I look and I'll build campaigns on these different triggers. But one thing that I do with social selling that kind of goes back to Kevin's point is, instead of accidentally sending something to someone else, you actually get to have this ground cover where you're posting content and everybody's seeing it. So not only you're going direct, but you're winning indirect as well.
I love the silence. I just like that we're baking in that for a second. It's super powerful.
I tend to agree with everything that Nicholas said there. So the thing that Will mentioned earlier, with cold outreach, having a trigger is really nice. And I think Sales Navigator gives you, I think that's what you're talking about. Is there like another go-to tool for social selling? Not really. Like Sales Nav is like it's where it's at, right? Like Sales Nav is like an incredible tool. We don't really have a Sales Nav for cold calling. Like, just because someone shows up in a Sales Nav list doesn't mean you can cold call them, right? Because the Sales Nav list is going to be very targeted, but it's probably not going to be like 1,000 people or 500 people. A good Sales Nav list, if you got 15 filters on it, it's got 25 people on it. And you're like, all right, these are the people in my market with the right triggers that I want to talk to. Well, 25 people, right? I mean, Justin Middleton, who I see here, he knows, right? 25 people. Well, shoot, 4 or 5 of them will ever pick up their phone, ever. So if you call all 25 people, it's going to be really hard. Mm-hmm. So I wish, and I've thought of ways like, free product idea out there for anyone who wants to develop this. Like, I don't really care, because I've looked into it. Free $1 billion company idea. Figure out when people have their phone in their hand and they're currently not on a Zoom meeting. If you can build a list, dynamic list where it's like my vision for it is like, okay, Kevin just sent a tweet and it shows that his internet bandwidth usage is low enough that like I can tell. So you're gathering data from all these places, and then it's like a live feed of like, here's who you should call right now because their cell phone's in their hand and they're not on a Zoom meeting. $1 million idea. Go build that and call me and I will buy it. I'll be a subscription for you.
I love that. All right. I've seen some questions come in, so we're going to do a quick fire round. I'm going to bounce some of these questions to either the whole table or one of you, depending upon what they ask. And then we're going to go on to the big topic of the day, which is how do you multi-thread? How do you use all of these tools together? So question for anyone, is reaching out via WhatsApp advisable? Any opinion on using WhatsApp for cold outreach?
I think it depends on where you're reaching out, right? Like I know in Brazil, that's like more popular than email. So I think depending on the avenue or depending on the audience, yes or no.
Cool.
I think, this opens up another conversation around like cold texting, which like, if you cold text me, you're dead to me.
Yeah.
Flat out. I just don't want it.
This cold texting thing, I don't know why people keep talking about it. Like when people did, like there's a post that like every 2 weeks on LinkedIn, someone's like, cold texting and prospects, here's what I did to change my game. And I'm like, guys, do you understand how illegal this is in the United States? It is so illegal.
I get them.
Illegal.
It's so illegal.
Why are you texting me?
Yeah. All right. Nick, question from Greg. What industries, broadly speaking, have you found are not embracing LinkedIn or social?
What industries? Ooh. Manufacturing. There's a couple laggards just in the way they've always done things has been in person. So like even I've seen pharma and like medical devices, they'll lean on like still being road warriors and going door to door because they want to show the product and put it in their hands. Manufacturing is the same way. But even then, like industry 3.0 and 4.0 is changing that too, and they're starting to move now. And quite frankly, salespeople are always on LinkedIn. So even though your buyer, the person that owns that P&L, isn't on there, I can usually still route in through sales or marketing.
Totally.
Or Slack
Kevin,
channels.
How do you usually go about cold calling multiple people at one company? Brandon said, feels like they're going to blacklist me after a day. LOL.
Yeah. So you got to have I only work with direct lines, right? So I genuinely don't believe that it's worth a seller's time, effort, energy to call gatekeepers all day. That's my hot take. Take it to the bank. I don't believe that's your world, man. We got to find you some direct lines. And it doesn't matter if you call 5 people at the same company, but the better question there is, know your target. Are there 5 people at this company? I mean, maybe if it's an enterprise sale and it touches multiple things and like, we sell this transformational platform that connects sales and marketing and finance. Okay. Know your target. But if you call 5 people at the same company and you're calling direct lines, none of the 5 know that you've talked to the other ones because it's 2022. They're all working from home. Right. Or if they're in an office, they got their COVID bubble. They're not next to each other. Right. So I don't think it's any different is what I'm trying to say. It's not very different than if you're calling one person at a time, or it shouldn't be.
Okay. Justin asks, is there going to be any live cold calling? Not today, but tomorrow, Florin, Tatulia, Saad Khan are joining Nick on a cold calling live power hour, and they're going to be doing some cold calling tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific. You can find that by going to Florin's profile or Saad's profile or Nick's profile, though Nick has a lot of events because we're doing a lot of power hours this week. So if you check out Florin, there's going to be some live cold calling tomorrow for an hour. You can tune in. It's going to be probably a masterclass. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing them do their thing.
Hey, also,
yeah, Kevin.
I'm doing live cold calling next Tuesday. Hop on calls, check it out. Come to my profile next Tuesday. Sorry.
That's awesome. Sweet, man. One last.
Can I this one from Daniel?
Yep. Sure. Go for it. Nick.
When sending emails, I'm getting a lot of opens with emails less than 50 words, no replies. What could I be doing better? And I noticed for myself that they usually look at my LinkedIn profile. And that's where, depending on how solid my profile was, if it dies there or if they reply. But I'm curious, what about for you, Will?
So I typically hear this, and what's going on is the person is typically framing a message all around them. Now, I don't have this email example, and so I can't necessarily speak to it exactly. And so if they would like to reach out to me one-on-one, I'm happy to work with them on that. That's an open invitation, but specifically to that person. The thought process I have is the person is, usually like coming in with either overcomplicated language, or they're like presenting it much more around like, here's all my stuff, check it out. And it's not really framed in a way that the other person can absorb and take it in. And what I mean by that is like, you're meeting them in their inbox. It's their to-do list. And so their frame of reference, their context is, I've got fires over here, I've got fires over here, and now here's some random advert that shows up that happens to be short, but it's still just like an advertisement that I have to translate back to the fires that I have going on here and here. And so if you can frame that message and that copy to speak to those things in a way that they can understand it, I find that you get a lot more response. So that would be my advice.
That's awesome.
I tend to write very little about what we do in an email. I'll lean on like my signature line to do some of the work for me. I'll lean on, just trying to get them to admit that there's a problem before I'm like diving deep into what we do.
It's interesting. One of the things, and I don't want to put words in Nick's mouth here, but it just kind of popped into head. One of the mistakes that we often see sales teams doing when they're using connection requests is they're literally just putting the whole kit and caboodle in the connection request. And I get the cold shivers every time too. It's like, you got to have some breadcrumbs here, man. You got to, and honestly, if you're using social in a way that's attracting them to you, you don't need to personalize connection requests. You can send them blank and then just continue the conversation in the DMs. Everyone who's here with us today, keep on dropping questions. We'll get to another quick round before we close out today. But I want to move on to the big question, which actually Laura asked earlier and has been on our mind, which is, how do you like to use all of these tools together? We got cold calling, we got emailing, we got social selling. If you were to mix them together, how would you blend them? How would you sequence them? And I'll punt, and whoever wants to go first, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, I think if you ask Will, he's going to say send an email first. And if you ask me, I'm going to say call him first. If you ask Nick, he's going to say don't call him or email him, add them on LinkedIn. I think that's how this is going to go, but I don't know.
I'm the opposite. So I'm going to say start with LinkedIn, send the connection requests so that they can like almost like have a face to the name, get some familiarity. See if you can strike up conversation there, like if they accept. But I'm also going to send an email at the same time and kick off a really short set of emails, a short email cadence. And if they connect at some point within that email cadence, I'll reference the other channel within that. I'll bring that into the conversation. Now, if I'm pulling cold calling into it, I'm gonna structure it as like basically a sprint. I've got a reason for reaching out, and I'm going to continue to hammer on that for 5 to maybe 8 touches if I'm using all these different channels. Towards the end is when I'm going to start bringing the cold calling in as sort of like last ditch effort. That's my thought process. But I could also see the argument for why cold calling should go first, because if they're phone friendly, you're going to nail them right then and there, and then you don't have to go through all the other trouble.
Kevin, what do you think?
I think you should send emails first. No, so to Will's point, let's talk about this. What's the reason that you connect with them on LinkedIn? What's the reason that you're sending an email? And what's the reason that we're making a cold call? The whole point of all of it is to communicate with them 2 ways. That's what we all want. We're all on the same team, that I'm sitting over here and this person's over here, and I want this. I want to learn about what they're doing. I want to talk to them about their world, and I want to share with them how I've helped other people like them solve business challenges, right? So if we're all on the same page that like the point is to get a response, the point is to learn something new and to potentially help them, then the fastest way to do it is phone, right? Like it's pick up your phone, call. Oh, hey, yeah, boom, the exchange of information, the rate at which you get information from someone is 50x on the phone versus like a medium where it's on their terms. Now, this is what makes cold calling really difficult and really like annoying and really like I guess difficult is the operative word here, right? It makes it really, really hard because you kind of get this one swing at the bat. And if you have a terrible conversation with them, then it's like, oh shoot, well, that didn't go very well. You can always follow up on other channels, but not everybody can be reached on the phone. And that's why I'm not a phone or nothing guy. Like LinkedIn is the greatest thing to happen to salespeople in the history of the world. In the history of the entire world, the known universe, LinkedIn is the greatest thing to ever happen to sellers, full stop. Why? Because back before LinkedIn, if I called Will and I said, hey, what's up? This is Kevin, blah, blah, blah. And he'd say, oh, all right, what? Yeah, okay. Hung up on me. How do I get in Will's universe? Besides, I can send him an email, but how do I get him to see the whites of my eyes? There's something different about seeing the whites of their eyes, right? Seeing their person, seeing their content, seeing their whole structure on LinkedIn personalizes the interactions in a way that just didn't exist. It just simply didn't exist before LinkedIn showed up. So I'm a huge fan of calling the people who pick up the phone first, right? Let's get to the conversation as fast as we can, have a structure, a method, a process to having cold conversations. Now, I also, when I disposition auto dialers, which I do for all my clients, like you got to disposition things, right? There is a disposition that's called not a phone lead, which means the people you call that are like angry badgers, right? Who is this? I don't know you. Take my name off your list. Ah. Okay. All right. Click not a phone lead. Don't click not interested. And then that person is a fantastic person to email and to use social selling to get in front of. But I teach with the reps that I work with. You follow up every single conversation on the phone with a LinkedIn Connect, not always an email. Like one of the things that I think people will say, okay, I had the cold call. Now I'm going to put them in an email cadence and that'll convert well. It might not, right? But that LinkedIn Connect, if it's timely, they see the whites of your eyes, they hear it, and then we can use other channels. So I am phone first, but you have to use the other channels because not everybody can be reached via phone. Like if people take things away, you got to realize that you can't just say call everybody or email everybody. You got to meet people where they are. So phone's the fastest way, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one of the questions, the way you posed it, Morgan, was if you multi-thread. And I think the key is you have to multi-thread because everyone's got a preference for how they like to be communicated.
Yeah.
But the other piece to it is it starts to create like a sense of, one, I'm a human being on the other end. This isn't just an automation. And two, there's a sense of urgency. Like I clearly have a reason that I'm trying to get a hold of you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to add is it's not an if, it's a you should.
Mm-hmm. Nick, how about you? What's your preference?
It's the same as what Will was saying. I always start with LinkedIn. I go to email and then I cold call. And it depends on the person though, because sometimes it does make more sense to call first, or sometimes it makes sense to leave it till the end. But I think the biggest problem with social selling is nobody tracks it. And so like your messaging, if you're actually tracking your campaigns with that specific trigger and you're getting a less than a 30% connect rate and it's been 3 weeks, cut it. It's failing. Move on to something else. 30% is the bare minimum for a campaign. It should be 50 to 80%. And what it means if you keep getting that is you need to pick up the phone or you need to get an email or whatever and book interviews and do some digging to understand the problem better because something's off. And I think that's the biggest thing that gets missed with a lot of salespeople is we just default to a channel and we just go hard and heavy and then miss, but there's no like, oh shit, maybe I should go and rethink why I'm calling or what I'm saying or who I'm talking to, because it's like a 3-leg stool. Right conversation, right person, right time. If you don't have those 3 things, you will never sell anything. And we need to constantly gut check that on every campaign, every trigger, every segment to make sure that it's functioning so that we can stack them, whether it's on email, social selling, or cold calling.
Just actually, this brings up an interesting point, which we haven't touched on yet, which are like benchmarks. And Will, you have a bunch of data on this. I know, Kevin, you have a bunch of data on this. Nick has a bunch of data on this. When somebody is engaging in your channel of expertise, what are the benchmarks that they should be looking for? So Nick had brought up for connect rates, you should be looking for 50 to 80% on a social selling campaign. Are there other data points you're looking at, Nick? And then I'll go back around and we can talk about email and phone.
Yeah. So, and I got this from cold calling. This is what we used in cold calling is, okay, how many people did you send a connection request to? Okay, how many of those turned into conversations? Okay, how many of those turned into meetings? Okay, what was the average sale value? All you're doing is reverse engineering your numbers and figuring out every salesperson has a natural gift on one channel. It's just your unfair advantage. You shouldn't let a manager push you into one of those channels because it's easier for them to track. Figure out where you can just kick ass and leave everyone else behind, and track those numbers on every channel and figure out where you excel, and then just double down, and then just keep your customers in mind if that's the best channel for that segment.
Awesome. Will?
So yeah, the reverse engineering thing, 100%. Yeah, I tell folks I'm less of a stickler about open rates than a lot of folks are. I find that it really depends company to company. One, there might just be like deliverability challenges at that company, in which case you could have like a low bar. You could also be reaching out to folks that tend to use Outlook or Apple Mail, in which case you'll have a low bar. And so like my baseline of 50% might not be your baseline. Like if I run a campaign that's under 50% open, I'm like, oh, that's weird. There's a problem. For reply rates, I hold a threshold of 10%. If it's under 10, there's either I didn't narrow down my field of vision enough, I didn't build a narrow enough list and have a strong enough compelling reason to reach out. Or yeah, the other thing that I keep track of is how long I spend per email. And so we track this within our own product, which is why I have the luxury of being able to track that. But if you're thinking about efficiency and how you're like running through your own process, how much time are you spending researching, writing, all before hitting send? You know, I hold myself to a threshold of trying to get it out the door in under 8 minutes. I think right now my average is 6 minutes and 51 seconds per every cold email. And so like I'm doing good, but it's something I keep mind of because I'm one who will obsess over the details and make sure it's perfect.
Love it. Kevin?
6 minutes and 51 seconds. That's awesome. that is great. I wish I could say that. Yeah, like it's in cold calling, you only need to cold call for 6 minutes. Or I don't have a metric like that. So in cold calling, just like these other channels, and this is the beauty of modern outbound is there's tools to track all this stuff, which is great. In cold calling, the two things you're really looking at is three. So let's say number of outbound dials, right? This is the hammer swinging, the bicep curling, it's not going to happen. The phone won't ring. Okay. You need to ring the phone. You need to ring their phones. Number of outbound dials, the number of connections to actual target prospects, not the wrong target, not the, gatekeeper. And then the number of meetings you set when you get into a conversation. As we've mentioned, we covered multiple times here, it's taking more dials than ever before to actually reach a person, right? If you were cold calling in the 90s and 80s, like it was 1 in every 5 dials would actually ring the right person because there were not all these blockers, right? Not all these things that get in our way that make it just harder and harder to have the cold conversation. So you have to solve for that problem. The problem is we don't know who's going to pick up the phone. There's 2 ways to do it. List validation services that will actually go check out all the people on your list and tell you by calling all these people and say, hey, these people pick up the phone. These people never pick up their phone. Don't call them. You can solve that equation that way, or you could use technology where you just say, hey, I'm just going to call 3 or 4 or 5 people at the same time. And whoever picks up first, I talk to. But people that never pick up the phone, I get past that. Really quickly. And that is the game. So you got to have conversations. When you have conversations, the metric that I have always coached to, and keep in mind, I ran an outbound sales as a service business. I had 12 reps making 600 to 700 calls a day. The metric that I held them all to, that was the golden standard, is 5%. Can you convert 5% of your target conversations into meetings? If you're doing that, you're pretty spot on, right? And like the really, really good people are closer to 8 to 10% of the time they will get a meeting, right person, right conversation, right pitch, do everything right on the phone. But if you're out there and you're making calls today, ask yourself, of the target conversations, don't count the gatekeepers, don't count the total dials, of target conversations, am I getting 5% of them converting to meetings? If not, there's a problem.
Awesome. Love this data. Love these benchmarks. So in this last little segment of time, keep on dropping some questions in. I'm going to let y'all ask each other what's on your mind that you want to ask somebody else here. We'll do maybe a couple questions and then we'll do one last quick fire round. So what do you want to ask somebody else on this show today?
I'm curious how long you guys wait before you pivot or change a campaign. So we were talking about, like, we have our numbers that we hold to. How long do you wait before you pivot to see if it starts to work?
I will. So the biggest thing that I pivot in calling campaigns, because that's primarily where I coach my clients, is like when you're having the cool conversation, it could be as little as 5 conversations. If you could show me 5 target conversations you had with the right person with this pitch, and they had a common thread of what they were talking about, like, okay, this didn't land, and they're saying, well, what do you mean? We don't work with those systems. Then 5 conversations is all I need to say, all right, yeah, we should change the approach. We need to change the script, the talk track, the way we're going about this. So sooner rather than later, I guess, is my take on it.
I love
So
that.
the enablement managers listening, there's a number for you. Will?
I was actually really curious what you were going to answer to that, because I was like, there's not a lot, like, because it's hard to get people to answer, right? And so you get a lot less data points. And so, but as you were saying, like, the depth of that conversation is so rich. That's like, I don't know if any of y'all like really get into scientific literature, but if you look at like neuroscience research, they'll talk about like a sample size of like 100 people that they put brainwave monitors on. You're like, that cannot be valid research. But the depth of stuff that they're able to see, it gives them enough information that they can actually make statistically reliable inferences off of it. So speaking on email, when it comes to changing or updating a campaign, it's always be testing. I'm a huge fan of breaking down an email into its individual parts. So you got your subject line, you've got your observation, you're tying that observation to a challenge. You're talking about what you do to solve that challenge. You've got your CTA, you've got your signature line. All these things are building blocks. And you can swap things out, you can move them around, you can change the way you phrase them. It doesn't have to be, the marketer's version of A/B testing, where you're saying like, I'm going to use, this word versus that word, and I'm going to know so much from that. You're not going to learn jack squat. You can be like, well, okay, I know that the word just is not something I should add. I'm not sure why, right? Instead, you're like, okay, I know what I'm adding in this like second sentence, and here's the purpose behind it. And when I have something that I'm A/B testing against it, I know what I'm trying to learn. That's like such a key thing. Now, you're testing one thing at a time, but you're always running a test to see what's the new optimal.
All right. Love that answer. Love those questions. We've got some in chat that I want us to get through before we close out today. So somebody around 20 minutes ago had asked, Will, what are some examples of good CTAs? Is it something like interested, ? Or open-ended?
So never open-ended. Please don't leave it open-ended. Your prospect doesn't want to think when they're going through their inbox. And so like the more open-ended it is, the less replies you'll get. I like what, the academic terminology is stimulus-based responses versus memory intensive. And so yes or no is a stimulus response, right? Is that a challenge? Is that a priority right now? That's a very easy thing to answer. I think one of the things that's interesting around like mistakes that people make, asking for time is an obvious mistake, right? It's not that it's not, easy to just answer no. It's that one, you now have to make them go do more work, go to their calendar, see if they have that time. But 2, you're just running into a buzzsaw that's their mental spam filter as soon as they see 15, 20, 30 minutes. So there's 2 reasons why that doesn't work. So it's got to be easy to respond to. Yes or no is easy to respond to. Another interesting data point is it doesn't actually have to be a question. And so if you say curious if that's a priority, that's a statement, and you'll actually get the same amount of response as though you ask a question. So the question mark is not necessary. You just leave it open for them to reply to, but you're still keeping it easy to respond to. The other thing that I see is, sorry, I was distracted. You were
sorry.
Kevin wrote, "I'd love to" on his whiteboard and put a big old line through it.
So I just think this is so important. This is so important for everyone tuning into this to like take this to the bank. Never, ever write this sentence. Never write that. Never write that down anywhere. Will, do you have any data around that? Like sellers love to like write an email at the end. They go, "I'd love to get 30 minutes of your time. I'd love to show you a demo of our solution." The only answer to that is, of course you would. You're a salesperson. Of course you love that. Ugh. Get this. Never, ever say this.
It's free, but Kevin, it's free. It's a free discovery call or a free demo.
Free.
Oh my God. But we're all laughing, but like I've seen so many sellers. I've seen seasoned salespeople, like VPs of sales, say like, "I think we should end it with an I'd love to show you next Tuesday." And I'm like, "Oh no, don't do that. Stop."
The other thing I see folks get wrong in the CTA is they muddy the ask. So sound interesting, ? Right? Good CTA, bad CTA. Sound interesting to learn more about how we're increasing people's positive response rates, right? You just like couldn't help yourself. You had to throw in one more thing about what we do. And I'm like, don't muddy it. Like it's what you want, not what you do and what you want.
If you guys want to test this with something fun that works really fast, if you got Sales Nav, you get 100 InMail credits. InMails are ruthless, but you get them back if they reply. So send out your 50. And if you get 0 replies, your messaging sucks. And it just needs to be changed.
It's true. I have responded to 1 InMail in 4 months, and that was because it was actually good. Everything else, it's a black void. And so there's pros and cons to that test. I just want to note that for a second. It's not as reliable maybe as entering into somebody's inbox because we have mental spam filters around InMails. But anyways.
So I want to, Will, are you done with that point? I don't want to like.
I'm good.
Love that. The one thing that I wanted to make sure that people also took away from this is cold texting is illegal. Like it's actually illegal. Like there are businesses, do some research, do some Googling around TCPA and other things like that. Like your company could get fined up to $1,500 per text message. So if you do a campaign of this and you're like, nah, or if you're using a tool to do cold text messaging, which is highly illegal in the United States, it's illegal. Don't do it. You should absolutely text people that you've already had meetings with, that you have a rapport with, that are in a sales cycle with you. Get on that level with them, and it's not cold texting anymore. You have all the context in the world for why you should be talking to that person, but cold texting outbound is highly illegal. Don't do it.
All right, guys. So we're at time. I want to be respectful of your time and also all of the folks who have joined us today. Thank you so much for this power hour. I've learned a ton. I hope everybody else has. There were more questions in the comments that we couldn't get to today. So if somebody loves your stuff, if somebody wants to learn more, where can they find you? Where should they engage with you guys? Let's start with Kevin and work our way around.
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great way to do it. You can connect with me even more. Where is it? This is my like personal site. You can see my podcast and all that other stuff. I got a podcast that I do. It's about salespeople stories. I'm very interested in salespeople stories. But yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Will?
Same story. Don't bother sending me an email. Just send me a connection request. Don't waste your credit on me.
Love that. And Nick?
I was saying, Will's got a really sick series coming out about looking at cold emails from the buyer's perspective. So I'm going to be watching for that, and I can't wait for that to come out. Same story, LinkedIn or b2bpowerhour.com. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks everyone for joining again. I'm Morgan. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And thank you to Will, Kevin, and Nick for a fire conversation today about sales development in our remote sales era world. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Yeah.